Oh, definitely.
Come on,
10 years ago.
he gets to register in about 6 weeks. That's in 6 weeks.
Is there a line to get in?
No, 6 weeks. Come on, today is
Okay, you can go in or you can join us. I've never been on
the
cruise before.
He gets to register. My grandson over there.
Oh, there you go. Okay, we can try it.
Give him a bingo sheet. No bingo sheet.
I know him from.
It's nice to see all you.
You're welcome. You're
Mr. Jerry, how are you?
Never signing this contract?
Yeah.
Good to see you. Bye.
Oh, good.
We'll start
Yeah, we'll have them back on starting up probably in September. So. Why isn't everyone
Yeah, just as long as she helps us keep track of how many people we have here. Yeah, just information sheet. That's it, you know, if you just want to have you a comment on the card, we have caseworkers, so if you're having an issue with any information. Yes, he will. This is, you know, some people just aren't comfortable asking questions loud or, yeah. Good evening. Doing well, how are you? Good, yeah.
When you get back to work,
Lee, what's going on?
How are you?
Good.
So,
Having fun.
are you? It'll be interesting. So what's the word in Washington?
there is no word in Washington right now. That's what's good about August.
Well, what's happening? I mean, there's some big things coming down the pipe.
There's some big things.
And the concern I think the concern that you've got is that you guys are going to get back in Washington on September 9th. We're going to have about 11 legislative days to figure out what's happening with the budget.
CR.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Well, it sounds like what the leadership is going to do is buy another 30 days. Have a short term while we continue to see.
A short-term CR. What are your thoughts on that? Because you know I'm going to ask you tonight.
Yeah.
What's your role in leadership on that? I mean, you want to wait?
Versus
You want to
closing
wait?
down the government? Sure, let's wait.
Okay.
That's the alternative.
At some point in time, you know, you talk about either the government in default, which they wouldn't be in default, or a government that's insolvent. They're both, neither one of them are very good, but you're going to have one or the other because you can't continue to spend what you're spending. So we'll chat about it.
Okay.
All right.
I figured that we'd chat about it.
That's a pretty thick one.
Hi.
The accurate report, that's just the memo for the report.
Good to see you.
Stand over here. You're welcome to stand over here in the back with the camera. No. Prefer to people have to be standing in the back if they're going to be videoing it.
Well, how are you doing?
If I'm not obstructing anybody's view, can I sit down?
If you don't mind, just shoot up.
You're not obstructing views, but if you get up and start moving,
I'm not trying to block anybody's view.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
What could possibly be? I mean, what an announcement in advance.
Sorry.
Because it's setting aside the law for something. And if it's the largest part.
I know, all of these.
Meanwhile, the rest of us have to trust the IRS to
And this is just a general legislative
keep our healthcare records private. I mean, hopefully as long as they're not associated with people. Finding Obamacare is whatever it takes to get rid of this.
Would it be better if I just put it in front of you? Would it be better if I just put it in front of you? You can have a conversation with them?
No, I'm not
Or would you
gonna
rather
answer questions.
Oh, and you're just gonna videotape everything?
Private insurance.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, who are you with?
I'm with the Nebraska Democratic Party.
Okay.
It's based on.
That's what I thought. Okay.
They have a right to healthcare. And if the Republican Party that was started as an anti-slavery can't stand up and say, you know what, we don't have the right to another man's land.
They're all, I'll give you the times and places, they're all there. I just,
Are those showstoppers? This is something real. That's a penalty.
I've been blessed beyond measure, and I'm not financially independent. I've got a wife and 5 kids that I love dearly. I've got 2 grandchildren that I love, and I've been that long. The last thing I want to do is take but there comes a time when, you know, our forefathers, those that came before us, their day of calling us, they were called to arms. We're not called to arms, we're called to action. And that's kind of where I am right now. So if that's what's needed, and it's incumbent upon me. Because this is for the generations that come behind. I mean, those that came before me, they gave me a lot. I consider some really in our generations that come after us.
It doesn't happen. And this is just something that is an encroachment on our liberty. What new legislation is in place now to make sure that
Did I hear you say you were in the Democratic Party? What, are you with the group out here?
I'm with
You're just
Nebraska.
videotaping. Okay. So who are you hearing? You guys are going to throw at the 2nd congressional district race. Do you know yet? Is it Festerson?
I'm not even authorized to answer any questions. I wish I could help.
You're just videotaping. All right.
Well, and you know, until that's possible, make sure that it can't be paid
This
for
is
in the
my card,
IRS.
and this is if you have a case.
No, seriously, the IRS. What's that amount?
I know.
They're not even from the job that they have collecting taxes. They can't even get straight income.
There you go. But we saved that for you.
What is the precise amount I owe? Behind the taxes. It's a ballpark figure in the middle of something that hopefully we don't have to pay this high amount, something too low to trigger an audit. And we try to get something somewhere in the middle. But it's always a guessing game because it's not true fair. You want a progressive income tax? 50% income tax before, 10% on fair. Oh, we're more fair.
All you have to do is call our office.
There you go. Overtime. From what I understand, with all the hail damage, you guys are still working overtime. I mean, that's a good thing. Jason and I were talking about that the other day. I said, you know, normally in the summer months it kind of slows down. But you guys are taking this hail damage right into the winter months. Snow and slippery weather. It's all good. It's a good year at Feast Street. Yeah, I'll tell you what. And I'm biased, but that Jason, I mean, he's just a good old boy. He's just a good old boy. And I told her, when he says to me before the meeting, you know, he was going to ask me for my blessing. We were sitting there talking, I said, Jason, I said, I'm pretty sure. I'm telling you, man, there's going to be days when we wake up and it doesn't matter how good looking she is. She is going to be standing higher. And I live with her. She is a great looking, blue-eyed version of me. And I'm telling you, it's not easy to live with. And he says he was up for the challenge. Yeah. He's the type that I think you could drive over him and he wouldn't say boo. So, good guy though. She was mad. How are you doing? Good to see you.
go back and do it differently. Have you start out. Well, my plan originally was to do it the federal. It was interesting. You can create a big.
We had very nice conversations.
Have a variety of different plans. No.
Make progress.
It's kind of a, how do I say this, but a hybrid thing that Obamacare is.
You know, I gotta be honest,
State exchange
wasn't quite sure what's in the ground. I thought I might be the only one.
But everything that goes into the control is controlled by the government. And that's the part that we disagree with. They're really going to be the same way as
Really?
fair question.
Too crowded?
Yep. We got other lists right over here.
It's all good.
We can do two at a time.
Can you put two people on one row?
How are you?
The only reason I got on Facebook was because
I owe you a call back. I'm here. I thought you were like,
I was thinking I needed to call you, so.
yeah, well, we'll touch base here. Today, I want you to tell us what you did on my list.
I think I got it.
Gee, it seems like we do something else.
Go to that.
Yeah, we have 2 cents.
I got close
So,
40
you know,
votes.
times a day, and there,
Yeah.
that the,
As in, it's the last shot. That we decided to change the law after X number of Americans who denying Medicare, saying you're nonsense. I warned you if I open
it's probably Douglas County Republican Party, but, yeah, go on there and like it. You'll probably like some of the posts. And don't hesitate, post. I mean, it's nice because that gives an open forum of the supporters and those that are concerned. And it's just a nice forum of an group exchanges information.
hopefully we can sharpen each other. That's what we have to do right now. Well, I don't have enough of the signal right now, I guess, but yes, I've got it on there. Yeah. You mind if I join? I feel like I'm not commenting. I feel like there's so many arguments we could be making right now. This progressive income tax, how do we have all the planks of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto implemented? And we just take them for granted. Here's a progressive income tax. This is what I said. Here's a progressive income, when I was talking about the IRS, and ways to get just, let alone that for health care. But instead, how about just compromising, make it the same for everyone?
Well, if you have a flat tax and fair tax by default, the rich would pay more anyway, because they consume more.
Yeah, well, I used to be for the flat tax, but I'm not anymore. I learned the Thomas Jefferson knew that countries that directly tax their people went under. And what business does the government have knowing how much money I make?
Well, they know what
Well, thanks to the NSA, but seriously, what business do they have? No, it's just that's why I've moved my thinking to a fair tax, but frankly, I would take it.
over what we've done. But again, you gotta ask the question, where's the leadership that's gonna move that forward?
What's that?
You gotta ask the question, where's the leadership that's gonna move that idea forward? It doesn't exist. No, that's the key, yeah. That'd be a good question.
What do you stand on?
This is just a general update
Let's see. All right, I gotta get my paper.
You keep trying to make me go.
Yeah, no.
Concerned I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, hey,
The ones I see.
grab this yellow sheet, it's got all of these town halls on the back.
Not a problem. Yes, if you have and you don't want to totally
Norma?
It's a trade.
I know that you've got
Actually, I've only known one other.
You know what, I think there's one on Saturday. I'm gonna miss it.
Get you a chair at least?
I can go to that.
You want me to get you a chair at least?
I appreciate that.
Get you one in the back here.
Can I sit right here? Can I sit right here?
If you want to, yeah.
That just doesn't seem like that.
I think they're out of chair.
That's fine. I appreciate it.
He's got an 8-year I guess. Yeah, that's positive. How are you? Thanks for being here. Supposed to be going to school. Yeah. No telling me how to He's enlisted. And believe me, mom and dad tried to want to go in and all. He says, yeah, I know. I want to go in as an enlisted man. And I said, well, what's your job going to be? He signed up. He says, I didn't picture it. He said, son, are you just trying to stress your mother right now? I said, you understand what that is? He says, first in.
Very proud of it.
So, I am very proud, but I will tell you, it does have me ratchet up my concern and my interest in issues with things.
My daughter's boyfriend is in the right there. Afghanistan's back. Now it's going to just found out last night he's going to Vietnam.
Really? They're sending it to the Marines. Where? Well, you know, that's a noble thing. I've got my family's very close. I'm very old, and I go out there and go out there. Everyone I am not. I never know you. This generation of product. I do not know my son. Well, I believe this is the easier Good. Yeah. But it is unfortunate because there needs to be a lot more. This needs to be
All right. I'm sorry, but I was only
there you go.
That's what brought my wife to me. Well, there used to be a U.S. Air Force office in America, but every time someone GCS is there's not I guess
We have another line over here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jim Kamonic. I'm the president of the Western Douglas County Chamber of Commerce, which serves Valley, Waterloo, Elkhorn, and Bennington in Northwest Omaha. I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight for this town hall meeting, and I would like to thank you for taking your time out of your evening to participate. I am going to act as the moderator of the town hall meeting tonight, so I would like to please ask you to be respectful of other people's time, and we want everyone to be able to ask questions that you feel you want to ask, but we want you to also be respectful of our time, and I will try not to interrupt anyone, but I will want to keep the meeting moving. So I would just like to thank you for your patience and your understanding. So I would like to introduce tonight our Congressman, Congressman Lee Terry.
Jim, and can everybody hear us in the back of the room okay? Yeah. Right, okay, I saw a few thumbs up, better than fingers. So I appreciate that, but I want to thank Jim with the Chamber, the Western Douglas County Chamber, for being our moderator tonight. I thought with as many people as I expected, which we even exceeded our expectations. Our new Senator Deb Fisher was here a few nights ago, and she had 24 people. So when we asked to set up 50 chairs, they were like, "Oh, you don't need that many." They said they have 100 chairs, and we're out of chairs. So this is a pretty good crowd. What I want to start off with is just to talk a little bit about what we're facing, and it helps frame, I think, some of the discussion tonight. Because what I want to hear is what your major issue is, and what your concern is. I also want to answer your questions to make sure we can get through as many questions as we can in our short time here. That's why Jim's here to help us guide us through that process. He's kind of a pro at this, and I like to have our local people here to be part of our town hall meeting. So first slide here. Move this out a little bit so I can actually see which one is up. This is an important slide to help guide some of our discussion. This is federal spending through 2014. This is 2013's budget. October 1st starts the new year for the federal government. October 1st is New Year's Day, so some of the discussions we'll have here is how we deal with the 2014 spending. And I'll go through that process a little bit just before Jim opens it up for questions. So I'm going to yell a little bit here as I move away from the mic. Hopefully the Terry genetic vocal cords will carry. This part right here, the purple, is the part of the budget that Congress controls. So many of you that are here and maybe want to talk about specific programs, that's within here. And defense is a big piece of the discretionary. So when we talk about sequestration and the Budget Control Act that was passed into law, we're talking about the cuts that occurred here is in this area, in the discretionary area. There were some reforms in the Medicare area, some reductions in doctors' payments. That was part of the sequestration, but the vast majority of it, 90% of it, was within discretion. Full 50% of it was in defense, and that's over 10 years. Congress doesn't fund this on a yearly basis. If it's mandatory, that means it is paid for without congressional involvement. That's what happened when the law was originally passed. And we'll have questions, I'm sure, on Obamacare or the ACA, Accountable Care Act. Only a little bit of that is actually in here. The major stuff is in the mandatory spending. So let's go to the next. So you want to take a quick look at where the federal government gets its revenues. 47% of it is from individual income tax, 9% estate, excise, and other receipts. Corporate income tax is 10%, payroll taxes that go into the quote-unquote Social Security and Medicare trust funds. There are trust funds in a artistic meaning, not a literal meaning, but because they're trust funds, that's why they're part of, don't go back, but the slide before, that's what makes them mandatory spending. Now let's go to the third slide, Felicia. By the way, Felicia here is the head of our district office. She's the boss of the local office. So this is the growth of the government in the last, 23 years. And the major issue is this one right here. Now, the issue here that I think is important with 17.1 trillion in debt, and by the way, we're down to 642 billion in deficit spending, so this, on December 31st, that'll be 642 in deficit spending, that's added to this. I mean, it's been adding up, but that's what adds up to our debt of 17 trillion. What's important is the relationship of debt to GDP. GDP is how we measure the size of our economy. And right now, our GDP is around 15 to 16 trillion dollars. So our debt is exceeding our GDP. And that is a warning signal that any economist will tell you you're getting to the point. If we had a less dynamic economy than we have, we'd be in default. Okay? We have a dynamic economy, we have lots of assets, so the financial area doesn't panic over this like they would if you look at Spain and Greece and others. their ratio of debt to GDP is actually better than ours, but they don't have the dynamic economy. They can't print money, being members of the European Union, and they don't have the assets like the United States has. So, this is still bigger than our GDP. That's a concern. So what happens when your debt exceeds your GDP is it starts shrinking the economy. Will you go back to the first slide? Net interest, that's not the interest rate on the debt. That's how much of the pie it is. Just think of what will happen to this budget if interest rates on our bonds have to go up. You all of a sudden start crowding this from 7 to 8 to 9 to 10%, maybe higher. Where do you get the money for that?
Credit.
So, can't do that forever. So that's the, I just want to show you the fiscal issues that we have to deal with going into that. Now, there's a lot of other issues that are occurring. We talked about 47% of the budget is individual income taxes. Another major part of the tax collection is corporate taxes. Both the Senate and the House are working on tax reform that I think is absolutely necessary. I've been talking about the need for tax reform to make us more competitive in a 21st century global economy, and I think it grows more important that we reform our tax code to be competitive day by day. And I'll give you one quick little story. I'm the chairman of the Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce. And so I've held a lot of hearings this early part of the year on manufacturing and what's necessary for us to do to get back 5 million in manufacturing jobs that we've lost since 2007. By the way, in the last 2 years, we've gained 500,000 of them back, mostly due to affordable energy, natural gas. That's expanded our steel industry, it's brought fertilizer and chemical industries back to the United States. So that's important, but we have 4.5 million to go. And just to relate this back then to the tax code and why I think it's important to be based on making us competitive in a global environment is, well, we had a auto manufacturing hearing, and we had car parts makers and automobile companies that manufacture in the United States. So we had the big American companies, we had Toyota, we had others that manufacture here. There was a parts maker that testified before us. He said, you know, my plant is right outside of Detroit in Michigan, and I look out and Canada's right across the border from us. We're only a few miles away from Windsor and going over the border. He goes, I'm paying about a 30% effective tax rate, and I can move to Canada and it becomes a 15% flat rate. All of Europe is on a flat corporate and individual rate. And so we're one of the few countries that are left, big countries with big economies, that have this type of a tax code. So we will likely have a vote in September or October on a reformed tax code. Now, whether the Senate will or not, I don't know. But we have other big questions looming. One is, what do we do on October 1st? Because the House has passed about 6 or 7. We can pass the rest of the appropriation bills. So for that mandatory part, it's divided up into 12 separate appropriation bills. Once those appropriation bills are signed into law, then there's appropriate authorization for those agencies to spend those dollars. Absent that, for the discretionary, for those agencies that rely on discretionary funds, not Social Security or Medicare, then they don't get paid, they shut down on October 1st. So there's an issue that's arisen that I think will be, Jim, discussed at some length, but hopefully we can get to a variety of other questions. Whether or not we should pass any appropriation bills or continuing resolution, which is an agreement to continue funding. And I want to hear from you guys on that. In fact, on your chairs, and hopefully where you're standing, you have access to a survey that I want to hear. It's anonymous. You don't have to put your name on it if you don't want. But I want to hear your thoughts on whether we should close the government down in hopes of bringing the president to the table to defund Obama.
And I look forward to the
United States of
weekend.
America, Lee, you represent your citizen, Lee. Don't do it. You did it once, don't do it again. It doesn't work. Show them the chart, Lee. Tell them what happens when the debt goes up because the interest rate goes up. The only thing that keeps it down is the confidence of our creditors. Explain it. Try to explain it, please.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's why Jim's up here, is to help moderate these questions and some of the anticipated pathos and emotions that go with this. Now, just to frame some of this, I want to be factually correct, so we have a factually correct discussion. The heart of Obamacare, or the ACA, is not in the discretionary. It's in the mandatory. So if we shut down the government, yes, we will be cutting off some of the funding, but not the majority, and not to the exchanges, and not to the Health and Human Services boards that they put together. Those were pre-funded when they passed the bill at a 5-year clip. So closing down 2014 is only going to affect some part of it.
How come you guys
Not
are
all
exempt
of
from that law?
What's that?
How come you guys are exempt from the Obamacare?
Okay, well, first of all, let me, would you please let we want to be somewhat organized here. First of all, I didn't ask for anything from the president on this. When the Obama bill, when Obamacare was passed, there was a provision that Senator Grassley put in that I agreed with, and that was that Congress shouldn't be in the federal employee's health benefit, even though every other employee still stays in it, right? And so the Grassley Amendment was part of that, and so every employee in Congress, me and my staff members, have to go into the exchange. I don't know the extent of the waiver. I think everyone's going to get a waiver for a full year because there's nothing ready in Obamacare. But the major concern there was you have employees of our office and every office that right now are part of the federal employees health benefit package until the exchanges come online.
Individuals aren't exempt. Other individuals.
Hold on.
If I could ask you, please.
So I'm trying to answer the question here, and I would appreciate if we don't have the interruptions, because that's just going to be chaos, and we'll probably have to take some precautionary measures here. But to finish, because I think this is important, because I want to defend our employees here on this. So what happens is, no one anticipated that OMB, Office of Management and Budget, that kind of is the arbiter of how things work, when there's a question, well, they said, well, if you go into the exchanges, the federal government, like they do under the federal employees health benefit, can't pay the 70% that they have always done. Their share, the employer pays 70%, the employee pays 30%. So what they found out is $30,000 a year in Washington, D.C. employees were going to be mandated into the exchanges and had to pay 100% themselves. So the waiver is whether or not, when they go into the exchanges, when the exchanges come in, whether the federal government can continue to pay that portion of their premium. So that's what it's about. And so if the question is that no member of Congress or their employees should have any health insurance or should have no employer contribution, then that should be how you state it.
Okay, my question back to you then is, if they can't afford it, why don't you run it like a business and downsize them?
My office?
Absolutely. Why not? Do you think businesses aren't going to be affected that way, so they're going to have to start downsizing? Why is it that the ruling class doesn't have to live like the rest of us? But you guys are completely wrong. And if you run the government like a business, even if you're a not-for-profit, which you guys obviously are, run it like a business, and then all of a sudden you won't have all these extra employees that nobody else can hire. Get rid of them. If they can't afford it, maybe they should go find a different job.
But the government doesn't produce anything. It keeps us from producing.
Okay.
That's why
we're going to not have intra-conferences either. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim to be our moderator tonight. He'll be the one to call on people, and we'll get some semblance of order here because Jim's good at that.
There again, please respect other people's time and their time to talk. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask Congressman Terry, please raise your hand, and I will call on you. And we want to try to avoid questioning and answering within the audience, please. So ask your question and then allow Congressman Terry to answer your question, and we'll try to keep this in an orderly manner. So I appreciate your understanding. Sir?
Well, this last year, our unfunded liabilities went from $117.5 trillion T to $124.7 trillion at the end of this last year. And for those people who don't quite understand, unfunded means we don't have the money, liability means we owe it. And yet our government continues to spend money like there is no tomorrow. Eventually, and who does the government owe that money to? Us. It doesn't owe it to China, it doesn't owe it to Japan, it owes it to us. And eventually, if you think our children and grandchildren are going to get Social Security and Medicare and all those benefits, think again. It's not going to happen. There are changes that are going to have to be made that's going to have to address the irresponsible spending that our government has engaged in, not just now, but in many years past. But since Pelosi took over the Congress in the 2008, fantastic.
Sir, do you have a question for Congressman?
And how are we going to get that under control?
Well, as you can see, there's people here tonight that would disagree with that statement. I happen to believe that if we're going to have long-term fiscal health for our economy to grow, create the jobs that we need, then we have to recognize the unfunded liabilities, future obligations as well. So that's easier said than done when we can't even do today's.
Sir, you in the aisle?
Yeah. I don't mean to be harsh or anything, but I really don't understand how you congressmen like yourself, Mr. Terry, can justify getting almost $250,000 in salary and benefits for being rated the most unproductive Congress in the history of America. And what have you done for the middle class? Where is your job? You voted against veterans' jobs bill. You voted, where's your jobs bill for the middle America? You voted to give the farmers a huge, corporate farmers a huge subsidy, but you struck food stamps for people that can't even hardly survive out here because of the lack of good paying jobs.
All right, I'm going to do the latter part, and then you may have to fill me in on the first part of that question. The Farm Bill is actually the best reforms that we've had. We eliminated several of the payment programs that have been in that Farm Bill for years. This was the most transformational free market farm bill in a couple of generations. It still has risk insurance in there. But there was the Fortin to go to your corporate farming. Actually, Jeff Fortenberry introduced an amendment. I voted with it. It passed, and it was in the farm bill that was passed out of the House of Representatives. That would limit any contributions to the farmers with risk insurance to $250,000. I'm not total, that's the value of their farms. If their farms are worth more than that, or their revenues are more than that, then they aren't eligible for anything. Okay? Now, those were major reforms. Things that we haven't been able to get done in 20 years in Congress. Longer, frankly. Then with the nutrition part, or the what a lot of people call the welfare stamps, but they're called SNAP now, but everyone still calls them the food stamps. We had to tear that apart, or I'm sorry, separate that from the Farm Bill. By not taking it up, it means that the nutrition program stayed status quo. To sit there and say that we ripped them up is totally the opposite of reality, in the sense that by not taking it up, there were zero changes to it. It goes status quo. There isn't one person that's been receiving food stamps or SNAP card, whatever you call it, that wasn't getting one before. They're all getting everything they had just before that. So that hasn't changed. But I will tell you, I voted for that because it also had $30 billion worth of reforms in there, in the SNAP program. There's very few people that can honestly say that there isn't room for reform in our food stamps. There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of fraud that occurs in there.
How much does an average family get in food stamps?
An average family probably doesn't get food stamps because they're for lower income.
Okay, well, how much total is that amount to?
It's a sliding scale, and I don't have that information. There's a you can go to the Douglas County offices and find that out.
Well, it's very little, though.
Ask him,
But yet corporate farmers get huge subsidies.
Not if this bill is passed that we passed out of the House, that will end.
Well, and also I want to know.
And let's.
Well, we haven't gone to. How come the House hasn't gone to conference and submitted the bill? Gone to conference with the Senate, so we have a budget, so we don't have to keep having CR.
We did send it over to the Senate, and they refused to conference on it. They did their own.
Boehner hasn't appointed the
so you have to ask that to Harry Reid.
Yeah, but Boehner hasn't
Excuse
appointed
me, we're going to
any
move on to the
conference
next
yet.
question. Excuse me. The gentleman clear in the back of the green shirt.
Standing up.
Yeah, you.
Standing.
Yeah.
Congressman Terry, thank you for being here. You're a brave man. Here's my question, sir. We, the people, expect our ruling class to be on the same damn programs you're shoving down our throats. Defund Obamacare. Oh, you be on it, sir. You can work
Please.
Why don't you want to be on?
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't hear the last part of it, but he said, will you be on it? Now, I don't know
Will you be on Obamacare, you and your family, like the rest of us, if you shove that socialist program down all our throats?
Well, first of all, I fought against it. We have voted 40 times to defund that.
Defund it, sir. You got the power of the purse. Okay. You know it.
Can be done. Cut into the man and really you want to be denied your care because you're not essential?
Let's keep this in order, please. Sir, the yellow shirt, right here. All right, we need to be quiet so we can hear the questions, please.
I have a couple of questions, sort of tied in. My son had 2 tours of Afghanistan. He had a tour of Iraq. Okay, he's still in the Army. They still can qualify for food stamps. Why is somebody that's 9 years in the military, served honorably, got many awards in the military for his service, have to look for food stamps?
Well, every year I've been in, we've done real increases in wages, and that, we haven't gotten there yet. But the one in the defense approach that could come up in the next, when we get right back, we'll have another 1.8% real increase.
Congressman, I've been practicing immigration law for 21 years. I've been working in the field of immigration law for 24 years. Will we see an immigration bill passed this year? That is my question. And I'd like to ask you for your support in my campaign. Thank you.
All right, what campaign?
I'm running for Attorney General, Your Honor.
Okay, Your Honor. So the first part is on the immigration bill. First of all, I can only tell you what I've been told at our conference meetings by our leadership, and that is different than what I've been reading in the paper lately, and different than my friend Paul Ryan has said in public meetings. So what I know is that, yes, the House will pass something. Now, stop. Can I answer, please? All right, then, if we can't answer, you said no. So here's what we have been briefed on. We're going to do a border security bill. We're going to do an E-Verify bill. There may be there's 4 bills that are going to be brought up, or may be brought up. One may deal with guest worker ag workers. There's one other that can come up. I'm just dropping it right now.
Expired visas.
It could be expired visas. Oh, I know, it's the Skills Act. The Skills Act is when college students come over to the United States. They get their degrees in STEM, they get their master's, their doctorate. Once they're done with their education, we force them to go back home and work for China or India, wherever they came from. The Skills Act would say, you've gotten that level of education, we want you to stay here. So then you can apply for a permanent card. Those are the ones. So the thing that we are not going to do is take up the Senate bill. There is no agreement on a pathway to citizenship. I want to be honest. We've got people on both sides of the issue.
Keep exploiting the immigrants. Let the foreigners exploit them because they don't have no rights. Please, please.
So the 2 issues that will be put on the table for some discussion, probably, and we can bring this up here if you want, hopefully in a more rational way, and have a real civil discussion. You have Chuck Schumer, who says that no Democrat in his right mind would ever vote for an immigration bill without a pathway to citizenship. Harry Reid said that you can't even say it's an immigration bill without a pathway to citizenship.
And they're right.
Yes.
They're wrong. They are right. Your family, your ancestors were immigrants. So now, why not give everybody else the right to be a citizen?
I'll tell you what. I want you to talk to Felicia and set a date and a time that you and I can have a discussion, and that way it'll allow you to have all the time you want with me, up to a full hour. I'll take whatever you've got to give, but this will allow other people to participate. So I'll do that.
An hour. Ma'am, back there. Yes, waving at me. Yes.
Me?
Yes, you.
I have 2 questions. One,
Can you speak up, please?
I have 2 questions. One is, if the House doesn't support the Affordable Care Act, which it's obvious that they don't, instead of voting 40 times to fund it, why isn't there energy put towards reforming the bill and making it more palatable to the Senate? And the second question I have is, why does the House continue pass bills that have no chance of getting voted on in the Senate instead of getting together and compromise?
Because if we did that, we'd do nothing.
You're the worst first Congress in the history of America.
Well, I think you're talking about Mr. Reed in the Senate now.
No, nothing is
The
getting
least
better.
productive.
Please, let's respect the people that are asking the question. You have the floor, ma'am.
Nothing, minimal amount of work is getting done in Washington DC on either side. So
That's right.
why aren't
Perfect.
you guys working together?
Work together.
Doing your jobs?
Well, that's a good question, and first, as Deb Fisher said this morning in front of a meeting, there's a lot more getting done than is in the paper. But when people work together, it's not newsworthy anymore. So you're not getting the full picture from the news on any channel right now. If you look, the only thing I can control is my actions within the House of Representatives. I can't tell the Senate leadership what to do.
What have you passed?
Please, do we have an?
There you go. I'm a taxpayer like everybody else. You get it now?
I'm not. So, we've passed a lot of bills, and yes, we have taken 40 votes, and we're taking a lot of grief from that, from the other side of the aisle. But the reality is, if we want to defund it, we have to repeal it, because the vast parts in it are actually mandatory, and so that's how we have to defund it, is just to repeal the whole thing and start all over again, where we can actually have more market-based solutions in here, which I think are more effective.
So it can't be modified?
Well, that's a good question, modified, and I thank you for following up on that. We have a lot of internal discussions, and we'll probably could have the same discussion in this room tonight. There is a perception that if we start modifying or fixing the edges here, that we have somehow changed on the very fundamentals that we think are wrong, and the principles of it that which it's based are wrong. And so we've said that we need to not tinker with it, but just repeal it.
And start over.
Ma'am?
And start over.
Green shirt?
Okay. Lee, I'm a business owner, and I understand where you're coming from a little bit, but you have to see how we feel out here. And I would much rather be somewhere else, probably just like you. But I've got 30 employees. There's maybe 3 that are near the age of 55, and all the rest of them are in that age group of 22 to 30. They are going to get hosed on ACA. Everybody should know that. Your kids are going to get hosed to pay for the immigrants and the senior citizens that are now reaching baby boomer age. I have a problem with that, major. I can't keep cracking the whip on those guys and tell them to work harder and smarter, pay for someone that's not supposed to be here, number one, and for someone that lives maybe a much more wealthier lifestyle. They have a problem with that. What can I tell them? Number 2, they also, the new ones that I hire have children with a number of mothers. They run the minute they see me coming with that child support. They are not going to have money for ACA. I'm sorry, you guys have got to get real.
What's your question?
My question is, what do I do with them? I can't just keep turning over employees. I have to have some way to motivate them. That used to be health insurance. Now that's gone. If they work 40 hours a week, I no longer can give them that insurance because I'm at a 145% increase.
Well, let me start with the latter part with your 145% increase. And there's no doubt that the smaller health insurance plans, you've said you've got 30 employees, so that's not a big plan. Those are the ones that are really going to have the large increases. And I've said this before in town halls when we were actually debating the ACA, and I said this was built to force employers like you to just dump your health insurance and put it in. And,
It was.
That's not true.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
They're gonna get subsidized to provide for insurance under the Health Care Act.
So, when you look at the totality of the Health Care Act, it makes it harder, and it does shift costs, there's no doubt about it.
How?
So,
Don't just say
I don't know
things
what
ain't
to
true.
tell you.
Hey, I'm a businessman too, and he's true.
It is not true.
Okay, what the hell do you know about business?
You're not
I'm just telling the guy to shut up. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm 81 years old and you shut up. And I'd like to say this.
Please, let's have some courtesy among us all in here, please.
Please, what I'm trying to say
Well, we
is,
do need you to wrap that up. So,
what I'm trying to say is they're not gonna stick around.
yeah.
They're gonna go on that government plan.
There's no government plans, private insurance.
Answer the question, give it to somebody else.
Sure.
Would you please? I am respectfully asking again that we don't have this level of interruptions.
Quit
Okay,
telling lies
we'll
about
move on to your next question.
I'm
Ma'am, right here.
Yeah, my question here is Social Security. Now, I will qualify for my Medicare in November, so this really concerns me. Plus, I'm retired from the Air Force, so I am definitely a vested citizen in this United States of
You have
America.
TRICARE?
Yes, I do. What I am concerned about, Congressman Terry, in 2010, you did a pledge to protect Social Security. And then you sponsored a bill with Pete Sessions to privatize it after you won. Now, why didn't you keep your pledge?
That bill didn't privatize. That didn't privatize.
Yes. Why didn't you keep your pledge? Why did you do that before the election to get elected and then let us down?
I told you it didn't privatize.
Why did you break your
Voted
promise?
for it.
No, I didn't. Sessions bill never ever
You,
came up.
yeah, you entered in the bill with Senator Sessions, yes you
And
did.
then pulled my name off, but it didn't privatize. So I didn't.
Yeah, you pulled your name off after someone complained about it, but you were, after the World Herald called you. But you were ready to sell us old folks, as he said. You know, you might be 81, but I'm almost 65. And I agree with the Affordable Care Act. I have tried here. You do not realize how fortunate the military are. We have tried here, but the rest of America needs the same thing. You know, everyone is invested. We go to work. The citizens go to work. They work hard. And they don't have health care. And we pretend that they aren't a part of America. And just like Rosa the Riveter kept it going while the men were off at war. And my dad was one of those 100 came back maimed, right? From the South Pacific.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We need to move on. Sir, clear in the back, striped shirt.
I would like.
Speak up, please.
Please provide a realistic alternative. If you repeal the ACA, what would you replace it with?
Well, I had a similar, not a similar bill. I had a bill that was based off of the Federal Employees Benefit Health Insurance Plan, so FEHP. What that does is it takes a large pool, was it 8 or 10 million federal employees or more, and puts them into one pool. Then the insurance companies come in and they compete against each other to get you to sign up with their plans. And the difference here is that the government's not telling the insurance companies what they have to have in their plans. It's truly, they have to compete to get you to sign up. And I like that model. It's worked with Prescription D. That's built on the same model. So that's what I would work for.
Okay, sir, up front.
Social Security. Back in 1971, I was at the White House Conference on Aging as a gerontologist, as a new student. And so there's some information that most people do not understand. Number one, when Social Security was started, the average life expectancy was 57 years of age. That's number one. Back in 1971, we told them the trouble they were going to have in Social Security and Medicare, and said you cannot survive. But the question was what is it going to look like in 2000? And we said, you're going to have to start doing something with the age. If you're 79 years old today, you are the same age as when it started at 57. And when it started, the majority of the people were dead when they could collect Social Security. We've never changed the system except for the 1 year. I think I had to be 66, and I think it gets up to 67.
I'm 67. I'm not 67 now, but I will be in 16 years.
It is an issue, along with Medicare, and everything was the same way. And now we're left today to be paying for what the problem is, and we need to start facing the situation and quit the griping and complaining about it, and realize that us that are seniors, hey, it's by luck that we're going to have anything left. But you take it back. The life expectancy was 57, and today it's 79. And that's your problem, and that's the issue. It's really the issue.
Good evening. I have a question. What do you plan on doing to reform campaign finance laws so people have a more equal voice in elections?
Well, according to the Supreme Court decision, we'd have to change the Constitution for that. And I have a bill to reform the Constitution, but it's a balanced budget amendment. I think that's a higher priority.
Ma'am, you?
Congressman Lee Terry, and fellow Nebraskans. I'm a citizen, and I just want to know if we all Nebraskans value family. If none of us here can live without our family, our children, why is our immigration system broken? Every day, children at the age of 2 or 3 are having to live without their parents. Every day, mothers and fathers are dying without seeing their children. And we have the congressional budget said that we would, if the immigration system was fixed, we would have hundreds of billions of dollars added to our economy. You mentioned the options that we had, but will you support a clear and attainable path to citizenship and not exploitation, and stop the deportations, and stop little kids from living without their parents, without their brothers and sisters? We know, because I am a citizen, I love this state, and I would, this state, this country, my city, Grand Island, Omaha, and I would not want anything else but to have my homeland secured. So that's not the issue here. I want to know about family separation and deportation. We need to stop and fix our immigration broken system. It's broken. It's not their fault. It's broken, and I think it should start with Congress. It starts with you.
Okay.
So
Congressman Terry, answer the question, please.
And
thank you.
We've met.
Yes, we have.
And we will continue to meet. And I'm going to say the same thing that I said in our meeting.
Will
And
you?
that's, here's what I said. I have said I don't support amnesty. Now, that means a pathway to citizenship. If we can come up with other ideas, then let's put those on the table. And I told you also at that meeting, and I want everyone else to hear, so I'm not confronting you. I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm not saying one thing to you and saying something different to this group here. My two goals, I have always said too, that we need to do border security first, and we had a nice discussion on whether our borders were secure now or not, and an E-Verify program. And those two are very, very important before you even have that discussion of what to do with the people that are already here. The reason why that's important, in my mind, is because, and this has been shown as true, I know I'm going to get heckled here, But if you don't have a way of stopping the next surge of illegals, I'm sorry, undocumented workers, then they will get them. So we've got to put those two in place. And I got to tell you that there's a lot of people in Congress that feel the same as me, that we haven't been told the truth in the past when we said we'll make the border secure. And so that's why it's got to be done first, in my mind, and the E-Verify. If we can get those in place, I'm not going to support citizenship, but let's down and talk about other ways to handle the issue.
Well, I just want to say I hope everybody here can go home to your families and give them a hug and a fake kiss.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the way you handled yourself.
In the blue shirt.
You did a great
Gentleman
job.
in the blue shirt.
A lady up front asked you.
A little louder, please.
A lady up front said that you promised something about not privatizing Social Security, and then it went into that. But about you not making a promise that you didn't keep. In '98, when you first ran, you signed a term limit pledge.
Yeah.
Saying you wouldn't stay here for any more than 3 years. What term are you in, and how many years is it?
How long are you going to live off the taxpayers?
Please. Please. Wow. Yes, that's true. And as when I devoured that pledge to an organization, I came out and said exactly why. I was open and upfront and honest about it. And you know, sometimes you do things that turn out to be a bad decision, and that was one.
You evolved.
And I did that in my first term, so it's not, you know.
Moving off to citizens.
Okay, sir.
Yes, I'd like to know why you didn't support H 413 brought forth by Justin Amash from Michigan.
Is that the defunding NSA?
Say again?
And that's the defunding NSA?
You read it, didn't you?
Could you repeat the
Well,
question,
Amash has
please?
done several amendments, so.
H 413, yes it is.
Okay, we have 3,000 bills, so if you're going to hold me to knowing each one of them, I mean the number. But you're talking about the defunding, NSA. NSA, I'm going to answer your question. The NSA, in my mind, has completely overreached in spying on American citizens. I truly believe it. That if you look at Section 215, the business section of the Patriot Act, it clearly states in there that the person has to be connected to a terrorism, and I said individual, connected to a terrorist inside the United States, then you can get their business records. This was the library. The NSA can come after my library records. Well, yes, they can. As an individual, if there is a clear connection to you, not you personally, but an American citizen in the United States and a terrorist, then they can go to a FISA court and get a warrant to get that, and it's a lesser. It's not probable cause like a criminal, it just has to have some articulable, provable connection. That's what that section says. It doesn't say to the NSA that you get to go out and collect all of the data on us. And so, I'll tell you right now, thank you, son, that Jim Sensenbrenner and several others, including me, although Jim Sensenbrenner's view on this is, I'll write it, you support it. But we're at least having conversations to make the Patriot Act very clear that it's about individuals, not mass collection of data. The other thing that I'm specifically working on within my committee is NSA and their top secret briefings from the NSA and a couple other agencies, FBI, have said they need to do that because phone companies only hold their data for 5 years. So have the phone companies hold it for 10 years if you need it that long. But they shouldn't just be able to collect that data. So the reason I voted against the Amash amendment, which by the way, that was in my view a symbolic vote. It would have been easy to vote for that and not have to answer this question. But if you took it for real that you're defunding the NSA, then you're wiping out all of the other legitimate spying, not on citizens, but ones that we know are terrorists in the United States. And I wasn't going to go that far. I do believe in national security. I do believe. So when I've read articles, I'm going to be blunt with you here. So get your cameras rolling, everybody. I wasn't angry when I learned we were spying on people in foreign nations. I kind of liked the idea. I kind of thought that we were supposed to be doing that. It is a balance here that has to be done. And just defunding all of those programs in the NSA went too far for me. So now we're going back and we're targeting the solutions. That's always what I've been in. Define what the problem is. Find the fix for that problem. I thought it was just too broad.
Well,
I agree there.
My follow-up to that was, like you said, you voted for the Patriot Act. You voted for NDAA. If it would have been called Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, or let's get rid of the Fifth Amendment, let's get rid of the Sixth Amendment, let's get rid of the Seventh Amendment Act, you think people would support it? You just said, we don't need probable cause. You just said that. They don't need probable cause.
On
Now,
known
excuse me,
terrorists in
on a
our
known
nation.
known terrorists, they're spying on us, all of us. And you're
Very
okay
well
with that.
authorized. I have no problem with
Someone that doesn't
has a
support
connection.
freedom and liberty first does not garner my support.
That's
Have a good night.
Alton, let's primary him.
If somebody has a connection to a terrorist organization,
The Boston bombers did and nobody bothered them.
well, that goes to an ethnicist more than anything.
Okay, we're moving on to the next question. Alton, you have the floor.
I've met several times.
Yeah.
Appreciate your having this meeting and some of the heated things that are going on here, but my question is a little more simple. In March, there was a Republican budget proposal that included the change CPI for the COLA for Social Security, and you voted for that. And
for the budget.
Alliance for Retired Americans is against that because it would be an immediate cut for present and future retirees. Can you explain that vote and your position on Social Security and Medicare in general?
Yeah, I appreciate that moment. So first of all, we have to pass a budget. The budget is a pretty wide document, and there's a lot of things in there that you could disagree with on a single point, but you have to look at it in its total, and it accomplished a couple of goals that I thought were very important. It comes up to our first slide. Does that budget put us on a path to a balanced budget? And this is the only budget that had us on a 10-year path to a balanced budget. That's my key. I voted for that budget because it ultimately accomplished that. There's been no, as you know, that budget document then guides what we do by way of our spending, by way of the appropriations. The part in there about Social Security aspects would take a separate bill. So there's been no votes on change CPI. And by the way, that was put in there because from the chairman, Paul Ryan, and that committee. But that was also one of the things that was in the Obama proposed budget. And he's put that up. So it was one of those that was put up because there was Democrat and Republican agreement on that. Now, you asked me what my overall view of it is on Social Security. I do think that we need to make some future changes to Social Security. And I'm not talking privatization. What I'm talking about is for younger people that they may have to wait, just like Doc said over here. Maybe they have to wait a couple more years. I was pushed back from 65 to 67. I view myself that, heck, I'm gonna probably think I'm 37 when I'm 67. And so I think we need to look at those things. I think there's a variety of things that we can put on the table to make sure that Social Security is able to match 100% of its obligations past 2033. And as you know, and everyone here, you get your get your Social Security letter that will say in there, because I've got mine, and it says that the expectation is in 2033, I think is the year, that there will only be enough revenues from Social Security to cover 75%. So that tells us those are things that we have to start thinking about now. And Medicare is actually, you didn't ask about Medicare, but just Social Security. But I actually think that's more of an immediate need. We're actually deficit spending on Medicare right now, not 20-some years in the future.
Just to make it clear, the Alliance supports eliminating the cap, the wage cap on Social Security.
Yeah.
Some changes to Medicare, which has actually gone up to 2026 now, where it's solvent. But some simple things like a 1%, a little over 1% increase in the payroll tax for Medicare would solve its issues. That's just one of the programs that are out there. But I would appreciate your support in the future of not cutting the benefits of retirees to try to balance the budget on our backs, because really Social Security and Medicare don't contribute to the deficit.
Okay, thank you. Clear in the back, gentlemen. Clear in the back seat. Yep. Please ask the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe we met before. We had a couple of things on the SNAP program, which was separated from the Farm Bill. You indicated that there was a high degree of fraud in the SNAP program. Actually, the error rate for SNAP is lower than it is for farm subsidies. With that in mind, would you support drug testing for recipients of the Farm Bill? And, secondly, on the ACA, I voted for it, but I have diverse views on this. I'd like to know, you voted a number of times to restrict abortion. I share some of those views, but this country, the United States of America, has a higher infant mortality rate than Cuba. And I think that's a scandal. That's a real scandal. If you get rid of the ACA, how will you address that? How will you make sure that goes away? And finally, on immigration, I've been waiting 3 months to get my roof done, so obviously we don't have enough Mexicans in this country.
Yeah, I don't think that was there a question in there? Oh, infant mortality, thank you. I do want to address that because actually our office sat in on a panel, not a panel, but the state of Nebraska that the governor put together to address infant mortality in the state of Nebraska. Because you mentioned that we do have a high rate, and there's a lot of studies out there about what's causing that. And the reality, and so in that rating, Nebraska was actually above average in infant mortality. And so the governor wanted to create a task force per se and work with our hospitals and our medical community and how we reach out, particularly to lower income people, to make sure that they have the prenatal care that's necessary. So some of this is being done through Medicaid, which is best handled at the state level, and I know the state of Nebraska has been doing something about it. Okay. Oh, I voted for drug testing, but not for farmers. Okay, ma'am? Right here.
Oh,
Social Security is pretty much solvent and stable until 2043.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I said Social Security is pretty much stable until 2043 at the benefits from the last graphs that I've seen. How much will you, I mean, what do you care with the Affordable Care Act do you see a big change in the difference in medications and the benefits that are going to come to people that fall into this, or what they're going to lose for benefits as far as their drug cost of their drugs and?
Yeah, one of the, for seniors on drug costs, one of the negotiated items with the pharmacy industry was that they're putting up their own dollars to cover more of the donut hole, and that just started this year. That's something that everybody agrees with, so we would, if there was a start over, that would be one of a lot of things that everyone would say needs to stay. And that's been a pretty good program. Part D has worked out pretty well. Ma'am?
Congressman Lee Terry,
Sounds like I'm in trouble.
with the most generous number that I have heard, the highest estimated number of permanent jobs that the Keystone XL pipeline will create for the U.S. is 150. With 14 leaks in the first year of the original Keystone pipeline, that is the exact same technology as this proposed Keystone XL pipeline, and with the oil going to be sold on the international market, and this type of crude being refined into a thick form of diesel that is not used in the U.S., can you please explain to me and the rest of Nebraska who use the Ogallala Aquifer and 40% of America's agriculture that relies on the Ogallala Aquifer, and the 8 million people that rely on the Ogallala Aquifer, the largest underground freshwater aquifer in the entire world. Can you please explain why you support and endorse this pipeline?
All right, well, let me start off by saying why I support it. First of all, the science in the studies would tend to disagree with some of your statement, and I'll walk through that. So I said early on that if the science said this was safe, I would support it. And the science, sitting at the State Department, the 15,000 pages of an environmental study and a supplemental in the Nebraska, the new route through Nebraska has said
that goes through the aquifer.
I would appreciate it.
Be honest.
I am. So I think the study's on the State Department's website. You can read that. So I've said if it was safe, then I'd support it. I think it's important to our country to have access to the third largest pool of oil in the world. That's to a couple hundred miles north of our border. We can completely offset Venezuelan oil, and even more than that. And I have said since the first day I ran that one of my goals in Congress is to get us off of OPEC oil. And this does that. Well, it doesn't accomplish all of it, but it's all in steps. So let me go through a couple of the points that you brought up. First of all, the study at the State Department says 50 to 100 permanent jobs. So I'll even go down 50 from your 150. Remember, this is an infrastructure project. Tell me on a bridge going over 204th Street how many permanent workers you see on that bridge. So compare infrastructure projects to infrastructure projects. But also in that same study, and there's been other ones that have done, others that have done studies on how many employees, indirect employees, would be employed by this pipeline. The one sitting in the State Department right now says 42,000 direct and indirect. I'm telling you what the study says, and that's what's sitting in the State Department. So don't cringe, but that's
study
what
that
it
you were
says.
talking about, how do you feel about the conflict of interest on this second environmental impact study being done?
You mean
Conflict
what
of
conflict
interest.
of interest?
The
Well, I'd
company
have to
that
look
did
through
this study
that
works
to see if
direct.
that
You can
impacted
Google
their
it. And
conclusions, because the testimony was all that they followed exactly what the EPA sets out as how they do the studies.
the company
So if
works
the
for
study
oil
was done
companies.
fine, then I don't think there's any ground to stand on. So the reality is, the two environmental studies that were done by two separate companies. Both said that this pipeline would have a minimal impact on our environment. The head person down at Lincoln on studying the Ogallala Aquifer basically said that crude can't even get down into the water. The second thing about this is that there were 57 extra safety measures put into place and went to school. That PHMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Agency, looked at the first Keystone pipeline and the leaks that were occurring there and made them do different things with their pump stations to avoid that. Most of those pumps were at pump stations because of bad seals. And so that's been remedied. They've had 57 extra things on this, including putting the pump stations closer. And by the way, why that's important is that when the pressure, if there's a leak, the pressure goes down, and that will shut the pumps down. So there's no more oil pumping into that space between the pumps, and that minimizes then the amount of oil that could actually leak out. But both of the environmental studies done have said, okay, what happens if there's a leak? And that's the comment that it would have minimal impact on the ecology, that they can clean that up. There's a variety of details that I've talked to with the company in Omaha that did the study that talks about how the water moves. And if you just sat there and let it just go down and percolate for a couple of months, that water doesn't move, so you can still go down there and pump that out. So that's where they come up with it.
What about the chemicals? And I mean, it's not exactly crude oil. It's tar and sand.
It's a synthetic oil.
The bunch of chemicals that benzene is the only one we really know.
Is equal to, for refining purposes, the benzoyl oil that we would completely offset.
And the study that was done for the aquifer.
Okay, it's all part of those studies. Excuse me, sir. It's all part of those studies.
You don't ask questions.
There are no aquifers.
I've raised my hand for the last half hour, and you haven't even looked my way. I'm trying to be fair to everybody.
Please.
Oh my.
But he's not the one you yell at.
What a patronizing.
You want me next?
Thank you. Mr. Congressman?
Yes, sir.
If we could just talk principles for a second. There was one thing I didn't see on the pie chart, and that was constitutional spending. And yet, the little chunk for the military was the only thing that really stood out to me as constitutional spending. How can we say that something is mandatory if it's not, doesn't fall within there? And, you know, talking about principles, I just wonder, what is the Republican Party standing for now? And what are we supposed to believe the Republican Party stands for? The party that was the party of Lincoln, the party where Ronald Reagan in the 60s clarified that socialized medicine would lead to enslavement of the medical profession. If you can no longer go to a town because they have enough doctors. You know, and everyone from the medical profession, the doctors to the janitors that work for them. If we as Republicans can't say that we don't have the right to another man's labor, then we're no longer the party of Lincoln. We're no longer the anti-slave party.
I appreciate that. So I'm interpreting that from our early discussions that this is why it's so important to repeal Obamacare.
It's part of it. But
so
you know, what we've fallen into is a play with the language. People say they need something or they want something, and it becomes a right. And the same thing has happened with welfare, and there's no means in place that I'm aware of getting people off of it. And yet, all of these entitlements are all of these entitlements that are devaluing our economy. It's not just simply the printing of money. If my money is simply my labor in exchange for your labor, a way to barter amongst each other fairly, what we are doing by giving money for no labor is basically introducing counterfeit money into the economy because it has no value.
Well, let me, I mean, that's
Selfish greed.
So here's, I just want to
Okay, I
put
gotta
out
ask
a-
this question. Why is it okay, not okay to judge sexual sin, but it's okay to judge greed? Who do you think you are to judge the sin of greed in another man?
And I respect that, and I'm a limited government person. Now, I do want to point, you said something about, you know, working, and I really believe that we need to help people find work and get them the skills that are necessary. In fact, there was an amendment in the first farm/nutrition bill that removed the president's waiver on the, what's termed welfare to work, that went back to how it was before the president's waiver, which said if you don't have children, then there's a special pathway if you have children, then you have to find work or be involved in some job training program. And that's when that passed.
And that was under Clinton, right?
Yeah,
He
Clinton
actually
signed
supported
that. Clinton signed that into law, and so the point I'm making is we are working on we're working on things like that, because I really believe the best thing that you can do for somebody is give them the skills to make their own living and survive. I think that's the right way to approach this. That's what we tried to do. When we did that and it passed, that's when the Democrats pulled all of their votes off the bill and it failed.
Well, it sounds like, from another issue that's going on right now, that there are a lot of farm jobs right now. Why do we need illegal migrant workers with all these people that don't have a job? And another thing, looking at the 14th Amendment.
Can I interrupt you right there? We had, I told you early on in my opening statement, we've had, I don't know, 7 hearings on manufacturing, over 45 manufacturers, all the way from small foundry with 30 employees to 3M, Lockheed Martin. Every one of them told me that they have job openings today, but they need semi-skilled workers. That today's manufacturing, it's not unskilled workers. Those are mostly in the ag area. And so there's needs right now that aren't being filled because people don't have the skills.
Well, when I look at the 14th Amendment, it says if you're born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, you're a citizen. If an ambassador from another country is here as a child, that child is not a citizen, right?
Because they're still under the jurisdiction of the country that they're representing.
Okay, how about people who are not here legally, who have not subjected themselves to just simply change the tense of the verb there? Or they're not
Then we
subjected
come back
to the
to this young
jurisdiction.
lady that's a citizen, but her parent is not.
Well, you know, it all has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Somebody was a citizen in another country, and that way.
All right.
But again, I just ask. Let's go back to my first question. What does the Republican Party stand for anymore, besides being Democrat-like?
That's what we want to know.
Yeah, okay.
Very good.
Okay, ma'am, black and the white cloud.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'm so short. You
Trying
can't
to
see.
move around.
Mr. Congressman, I have emailed you, I have ripped you up one side and down the other. I will continue to rip you all up. And I would love it. You don't want this little lady mad.
Yeah.
And I'm mad right now. I am a senior citizen. I worked 40 plus years to get where I'm at. Which is not a lot, but I'm comfortable. I see these young kids in here, and I hear some of their questions. And it's good questions, some of them, but they still haven't done what we, the seniors, have done, and our parents have done for us, which is get us each one more step up that rung. When you and Congress and the President threaten to take our Social Security away from us, take our Medicare away from us, because that's an entitlement. As far as I know, it was not an entitlement. It was a mandatory to us. We were told we had to do this. Government was supposed to leave it alone. You were never to touch it. Not just you, previous. They all did it. They took our hard-earned money. Now we're here wanting what was supposed to be ours. And you and Obama are saying, I'm not going to pay you if the Republicans don't bow down to me and give me what I want, which is the DREAM Act for illegal immigrants, which is
For students.
all kinds of things. My question to you, sir, are the Republicans going to really stand up for the American people? We all want the same thing. We want freedom. We want prosper. We want a home. We want children. We want food. We want pride, but we don't have it. So are you guys going to do what is right for the American people? Stop your spending, remove illegals, enforce our laws, and stop this Mickey Mousing around.
I appreciate the frustration and the voice there and share that. I do think we need to do more in getting our spending under control. We have sequestration, which is a start, but the reality is to reduce any spending, you need the Senate and you need the President to sign that. So every part of that's going to be a battle. And we can wage that battle.
I understand that, and I'll give you credit for that. But where your sequestration is going is you're making us a weak country. You're taking money from our military. These men and women, oh my God, they're coming back half people. And they're fighting for us. And what are we doing? We've got people spitting on them, stomping on our flag. Who ever heard of such a thing? Our schools don't even teach our kids pride, let alone the parents. So I'm just saying to you, sir, when are you guys going to be Americans again? When are you going to take what you're supposed to do? You are our checks and balances. You are supposed to rein in that president. You are supposed to make him follow the Constitution.
There's his primary.
And have you done it?
Right there.
No, sir. Are you going to?
The President would be spending a lot more, and there'd be a lot more Obamacare programs if we weren't there.
Congress passes all the revenue.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes left, and we'll go to the gentleman that was frustrated. Do you have your camera back? I mean, you can. I appreciate it.
All right, please, so we can hear the questions. Thank you. Please.
Not here.
I'll repeat his question for the people in the back.
I was wondering about your comment in the very beginning where you said that you were for the flat tax.
Yes.
Why is it that you're for the flat tax where it's been a constant thing over the years that the Republican Party had wanted the flat tax, which only benefits the wealthy? Why do you want to just benefit the wealthy?
Well, I would disagree with that. And, okay, he asked me, why is a Republican like me supporting the flat tax when the flat tax just enriches the rich? All right, paraphrasing, and frankly, I don't believe it does. And secondly, the way that you can map out how it looks in the budget, although we don't know what's going to come out of the Ways and Means Committee or the Senate Finance Committee, but it will still have two where the lower income is at a 10%, and the higher income will be at a 20% or a
That's
little
what
higher
we're paying
than
now.
that. So it's still regressive in that sense, or progressive, whatever way.
It's a lower rate than they're paying now, the
Okay,
wealthy.
all right. Ma'am in yellow, been very patient, thank
But,
you.
by the way, it removes most of the deductions. So that's how you get to a true flat tax. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, one of the opportunities we have is to hold you accountable for the way you have voted in the past. So I have two questions. You voted against the Lilly Ledbetter Act, which is pay equity for women, and I would like to know why. And you talk about infant mortality rates, and you continually vote against the CHIPS program.
So, the Lilly Ledbetter Act was an additional layer. We already have the EEOC. There are already laws on the books on any sex discrimination on wages, that they have access to and a remedy already available in the law. We have EEOC at the city level, the state level, and then there's also federal courts that you can go in. So the Lilly Ledbetter bill on the surface sounds very, I don't think any one of us in this room would
Why
agree.
not vote against it?
Please.
So, on the surface, it sounds like something everyone would want to say. Everyone would agree, for the same position, a man and a woman should have the same pay if they're doing the same work. Again, that system's already placed to adjudicate. So adding another federal layer on there, I disagreed with. And if you really look down into how they gathered that information, was very, very intrusive and bureaucratic, because it basically said is that any work records have to be given to the government, and then they will assess. And we come back to the same reasons that I voted against Obamacare. We're giving too much power to the federal government.
So keep discriminating against women.
No, there's already a system. That's the type of rhetoric that comes up, though. Right. Because you get accused of being anti-woman or having a second act. So the second one, CHIPS. Again, that CHIPS program is an expansion. I think there's better ways to do it than just another state-run federal mandate on kids.
Well, it raised the eligibility.
Anything against the poor and the middle class, you're against. Anything for the wealthy, you're for.
Please, we're trying to respect everybody's question, please.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, we're going to go right here.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions going back to Social Security and Medicare. One, going back to what the gentleman in the back said about increasing the cap on payroll tax payments to help fund Social Security and Medicare. Right now, I think that cap sits at $113,000 worth of income. So if you make $400,000 a year, you pay the same in payroll taxes that somebody who makes $113,000 a year would pay it. Would you be supportive of increasing that cap to raise additional funds?
Not
and then since you brought it up, just a second question. You said he didn't mention Medicare. I'd like to hear your position on what we can do to fix the issues with Medicare and all of that.
Very good. The last one could take another hour to get through, because I think there's a lot of improvements we can do to Medicare. And they do with the way we deliver health care. And so the question here is, how will you work with Medicare? Then the second one is on Social Security and raising the cap or eliminating the cap. I think that's a legitimate issue to put on the table. I don't know if I would take that as a sole solution, but I think there has to be others. Now, if I remember the President's Commission, the Bowles-Simpson and Bowles-Simpson 2 suggested a hybrid between several of those. I think that's a legitimate thing to look at. And Medicare, most of Medicare has to deal with how we're actually providing our health care services And I've read several studies about if we manage the health care better, and by the way, this doesn't mean manage like preventing you. This is, especially with many of our seniors have multiple chronic diseases, and studies show if you have your family doc, an internist, somebody that can be the manager of your case. Because what we find out is that seniors who have their health care better managed, where all the doctors are on the same page, end up cutting their yearly medical expenses by 20%, sometimes as much as 30%, especially on a diabetes one that was done within the veterans. Those are the type of things, that's called a medical home, by the way. Those are the type of things that we should be looking at in Medicare. By the way, the president, and I said this today at the chamber event, one of the things that everybody agreed on in the ACA was giving Health and Human Services more power, not power, that's a wrong word, flexibility to use different systems that the private sector has been using. And by the way, I would like to see more private sector be involved in the process. But there's a reason why the mob is setting up fake medical fronts in Miami and billing Medicare, is because they know they're more likely to get away with it than a private insurer. Private insurers do a lot of things to weed out waste, fraud, and their government's not doing it. Well, ACA says they have to start doing those things. So weeding out the fraud that's in there. There's a lot of other things that we can do that kind of, they're all inches.
Isn't that fraud protection you're talking about part of the $750 million worth of savings that you yourself criticized in the past?
Yeah, that's, now we'll have to see it. Otherwise, if it doesn't come back, then that's what the president said will come out of Medicare. So if they can find those savings, they have to be made up somewhere.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions. I'm going to take you in the back there, sir, with the beard. Yeah, looking around behind you, and then I'm going to take you right here. Those will be the last 2 questions.
Oh,
You already
had a question.
Yeah.
Oh, did he? Yeah, you already had a question.
All right, I'll take you. Okay, sorry.
My question is that we do a lot of investigating, we have a lot of panels in Washington, and the problem is, that one lady brought it up before, that we get nothing done. My concern is about the Benghazi is, being an ex-vet, we had 4 Americans that were left on their own, and no one went to save them. And there should have been some Marines or someone there to get the Americans out, even the bodies. I don't care. But we didn't send anybody. And no one, and I know we're doing investigations, and we're looking to see what happened, but we are nowhere, and it's almost been a year.
Yeah, it's, Benghazi, I've said before, and this may be an understatement now as we're learning more facts, was monumental incompetence by the State Department.
Then why don't you support H.R. 36?
So let me talk about H.R. 36. I haven't gone on it yet, because what that does is creates a special committee.
With subpoena power.
What's that?
With subpoena power.
It is time to subpoena.
Power.
It's time.
But we already have the Defense Committee and the Government Reform, both of which has subpoena powers. And I like Darrell Ice's investigatory skills, and they're working it pretty doggedly. So why would we have
the last 4 years we're not going to get anything done?
So I will tell you that they are issuing subpoenas, they are interviewing people, and they are doing what they're supposed to be doing in those investigations.
Those guys need justice, that's all
I agree with you 100%.
It's our last question. This will be our last question.
Yes, sir.
Congressman Terry, thank you for coming tonight. Had quite a
Thank you for
spirited
coming
discussion. I guess one retoриcal question I think a lot of people have an opinion about is, why is it greed for me to want to keep what I make when it's not greed for you to want to take it away from me?
Amen.
Secondarily, I understand you have been put on a task force to evaluate potential reforms for the renewable fuels
Yes.
legislation. And I'd like to know what ideas you have about what those reforms should be.
Well, we have not met yet to kind of work
You've had
out the
hearings.
principles, but we have had 3 hearings, in fact, on the renewable fuels portfolio. And this is, I'll get to you in just a second, because I think you get to be last. So anyway, to get to that, we've identified 2 areas specifically that need to be fixed. One is the RINs, the fake commodity that was created here. We've got to fix that. The blend wall, which is the one that's forcing up the amount of ethanol that has to be used per year under the EPA rules. We've got to deal with that. And frankly, we have to set better parameters on the amount of ethanol that needs to be blended. So the other part is, I still believe in biofuels. I believe in research and development of those biofuels, particularly cellulosic. I think it needs to be part of any portfolio if we're going to be 100% independent of OPEC. And so I think we should continue research and development
Solar and wind.
into cellulosic. And, well, wind as well. and
It's here
solar.
in Nebraska.
I'd much rather spend dollars on solar and research and development than subsidizing Solyndra.
Go
For manufacturing.
Yeah, Solyndra worked out great.
So, I think you pointed to this man.
Well, he's already asked one.
Oh, you did ask. Well, we can't do that. We can't have seconds, sorry.
One more?
Well, there's so many hands on me here till 10 o'clock.
We've got time.
Well,
Come on.
okay, we want to thank you. We'll do one more.
Congressman, you and I have had the opportunity to engage before. And you've always told me that I've been blunt but fair. And tonight I'm going to be blunt and I'm going to remain fair. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to discuss the whole issue of leadership. Because I think that's what we in the Republican Party and your constituents are looking for. And as I look at this, I'm just wondering if anybody in the House went to Speaker Boehner before you took your summer break and said, Speaker, this may not be the best time to be taken off for 5 weeks. We've got a lot of unfinished business. I'm wondering what exactly you're standing for when you come into this event tonight and you're giving us a survey of what we want. When you get back to Washington, you're going to have about 10 legislative days before the end of the fiscal year. You've got to make a decision whether or not you're going to offer a continuing resolution, and you've got to make a decision whether or not you're going to fund Obamacare in that continuing resolution. And you're asking us tonight in this survey what we think. Congressman, here's what I'm thinking, and I don't know where the rest of you are, but what I'm thinking is we are desperate for leadership. And I would feel much better if you came here tonight and stood behind that podium and told us what you're going to Speaker Boehner and telling him about the upcoming continuing resolution. Getting the spending under control, and what exactly are you going to do specifically to offer leadership on these issues? You've got 10 days when you get back. If you don't have it figured out by now, my concern is that you don't have a plan. So I would welcome you to take the closing opportunity of this meeting and tell us what is your plan. Not what do we want to see, because that horse has left the barn. You know what your constituents want that sent you to Washington. You know what we want.
He is not listening to us.
So that's what I'm asking you. And I'm trying to be fair, but I'm telling you, when we look at the likes of Congressman Gowdy, Congressman Amash, Congressman Gohmert from Texas, Louis.
Steve King.
Steve King. Steve King has become the adopted voice for conservatives in District 2.
You got it.
We're here to listen to what you're going to do to offer leadership.
Well, I would beg to differ in that listening to people is not leadership. I think it's important to listen to people.
So we're in agreement. Your constituents are speaking. You're our voice in Washington. We don't hear it.
Action plan, Lee. Action plan. What is it?
Can't standing with those people help? I mean, we don't see you stand with them either. We're kind of wondering what is going on.
Okay. Well, first of all, I say Trey Gowdy's the real deal.
We agree.
And Steve and I are friends, although he occasionally says things I disagree with. But, so, there, well, I'll talk to you when we finish here. The plan, first of all, is the options here is to shut down the government. And I'm going to tell you,
You can fund it without shutting down the government.
I don't think that should be absolutely the last thing we should do.
Okay, so let me ask you
So
something.
not the first thing, of which some of my colleagues have come out and said.
So
I think there's a lot of room there to get.
They haven't said they want to shut down the government. They said they want to defund Obamacare within the continuing resolution.
So you
can the House not control the purse or not? And what is your position going to be? You said just a little while ago, if I'm not mistaken, that you have to repeal it before you can defund it. If that's the way it's going to be, then we're going to be under Obamacare. Get ready for it. It's coming.
Let me work through that a little bit. And by the way, let me work through that, please.
That's not true. I have a job, and my company has told me what is coming, and it's not good. I'm a long ways from retirement. I'm a long ways from getting my Social Security, but what you're doing to my generation and younger is a crime. You've taken that from me, but my taxes went up this year to fund it. What's going on in Washington?
Please.
So
That's Obamacare, and it's,
go ahead.
Because this gentleman superseded. The CR, if defunding Obamacare is in the CR, I'm all in.
Is it
Okay.
even legal for a
That's fine. But that's not what the CR is, keeping the government open.
There's no layouts in the CR for specific items to get the government open.
The CR is generally, those are what the appropriations, these usually keep the appropriations at this level. If defunding Obamacare is put in the CR, I'm supportive of the CR. But the question that's going to be before us is going to be, do you keep the government open while you're continuing negotiations for 2 weeks or a month or whatever? Or do you close that down to force the president to come to the table? And the issue is, why would he ever come? I think you've got to think through some of these things, or we have to think through. Because the president, I don't know if he will ever come to the table to eliminate Obama.
He won't. He will not come to the table when you allow him to decide what parts of Obamacare he's going to implement and what parts he's not. By what legal authority does he decide he's not going to implement the employer mandate? If I'm not mistaken, that's a law in the books, and the executive branch does not have that right. Am I correct?
Yes.
So the answer to this from our Congress was to immediately push forth legislation not to enforce the private mandate. Why isn't there something in the House going on right now that says, Mr. President, if we can't defund it, we're going to implement every last bit of it. We're not going to give any exemptions, and we're going to watch this implode.
Exactly.
Well,
It's against the law to do that.
because
You
that's
can't
the
take
vote
that
that we
out.
took about a week before that. So it's not like we haven't done that.
But you allow him to go around.
You've done that 40
all the
times.
Congressman.
No, you haven't done it. No, there's been nothing. Speaker Boehner has done nothing to force the president to implement the law that he signed.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Well, we're trying to.
So, Congressman, I do appreciate.
I understand the paradox of that statement.
You're just afraid that people are going to find out how good the Affordable
I
Care Act is. That's all you are.
I appreciate you taking my
Public's
question.
lying to you.
I'm sorry, but we have to clear the facility now, they're getting ready to close up. So I just want to give a final thanks to everybody
Why is he quit
for
stopping?
coming out tonight.
He's not.
No, he didn't. He said he didn't have to.
Thank you all.
Possibly in the primary. Mark, you don't have one with me. Give me your, can I have your email address?
We gotta go. Can you do that sentence? I want to talk to him. You want to talk to Lee? Oh, him? I admire you for that.
Well, since it's the most exercise I'm going to get while I'm out here tonight, I figure I can at least stand over and pick them up, right?
I'm going to answer your question about we had the early secondary education, SEA, Reform Act on the floor, and I'm here to by the way, we passed it in the House and now it goes to the Senate. That's why I wanted to argue with these people here, but I had to resist. If you want all this shit to be passed, we're on par to have a record number of votes over a year and the Senate have a record low vote. You actually misspoke. Repeal.
That's a big difference.
Well, they're never taken it is kind of splitting hairs in part because so much of the language for Obamacare spending was put into mandatory spending. The only way to defund that was to repeal it. You just can't say no funds shall be spent on this. To do that, you're defunding 10% of Obamacare.
The thing I wonder about is, if Obamacare was only comprehensive, it started in the 70s. Well, it started in the 70s, but since then,
that has been brought up, and I think there's already a working through the federal system. Good to meet you, and hopefully you'll be on the next telephone.
I will, and I'll hold your feet to the fire. You gotta believe it.
Your job as CPA chairman, one of every 4 shoes we sell is made in the United States or assembled here. Therefore, we can say it's made in the USA. 1 in every 4. 1 in every 4.
Shoe or pair of shoes?
You know, I'd love to.
That's going to be painful.
Your dad wants to know when you can get an hour.
Nike. Here's what happens is New Balance. We actually had the shoe manufacturers in front of us, so I actually know a little bit about this. But what they do is the shoes, the key components that are kind of their trademark stuff are all manufactured here, and then they send them over to the parts already made over to not Taiwan, I think it's Indonesia, and they're assembled there and then sent back. So yeah, enough of the shoe is
They claim made in the USA. They say 1 in 4 of our shoes are either assembled or at the factory here in the United States. Well, we say that we make USA on our shoe.
That shouldn't be good.
Yeah. That's pretty
That's what the water.
Yeah, we stick with it. And that's what brought us to now.
Hey, we've been, what is it?
You don't have to call, just tell me when.
You're gonna make it down to Pacific Ridge? Or it's 168th and Pacific and Dodge? Pacific Springs, so that's really nice.
I hate that.
Really? Well, it's not like the nicest one, but it's easy and it's cheaper compared to some of the
The first hole, you have to lay up on.
Right.
And then you got to.
The first one's a challenge. I remember talking to Marty.
The second hole is a par 3 through trees. Then the third hole, it takes too much to get over that creek. And the fourth hole is too narrow.
I hate that. We were out at Ashland. What's the golf course out there?
Iron Horse.
Yeah, that's great. That's a heck of a challenge.
I like that course.
But there's one where the water, where it's like you got to get, it's like almost a 90-degree angle. You got to hit it just short of the water, and then right when you're there, you have to hit it up on the hole, and that's one. Man,
Yeah, I like
get yourself into some water
That's
there.
tough. I play a course in Glenwood Springs.
Right.
Has 8.5 miles of cart path.
You have to switch out the golf cart to support it. Yes, once.
The cart path from the 9th green to the 10th tee cost $1.1 million. It has 10 bridges, a tunnel, and I don't know how much cement. $1.1 million for just that going from one hole to the other.
That's amazing. There's another one out at Ashland,
No, that's the country club.
Yeah, Matt was telling me about that. We were going to go there this Sunday, but it rained, so we did end up going to Pacific Springs just because it's close and it wasn't raining out west.
I've never played the country. Well, I've played Iron Horse several times.
Okay.
I play Stone Creek. Yes, they're for friendly.
Okay.
No tree.
You know who was golfing there was Keith. First name Keith, Jerry Keith, SCI guy. SCI security company. He just happened to register and we played really hard. So
That's what it was.
older guy.
Older
guys. You make him well. Let's see.
Don't just.
You play right. Is it FBI? No, SCI, the local security company that puts the alarm systems in houses and stuff. Where should I go this? I usually stick with field club. Just because it's field club.
Well, I'm playing field club Monday.
Are you?
Yeah.
What tea time you have?
I got, it's a for veterans.
Okay.
Escorted out of here.
Yeah, I haven't played the field club for 20 years.
It's a fun course. Yeah, it's, well, the thing that I don't like about it is I think there's 3 holes. One that you have to shoot over the fence, and then coming back, you have to shoot back over the fence.
All right, we're live again.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Felicia.
But anyway, we won't keep you.
You too.
Let's start raising money now. Right now for our candidate. Get out there and we can beat this guy. He's not popular amongst the party right now. You know, but
We did a good job. You did a great job.
yeah, I you know, I don't want to get away with lying and bullshit and all this stuff, you know.
We got the
Yeah, I know he is. So, but I don't know if he can. I don't know if he'll get easy trying to. No. But he's losing his support amongst his own Republican base, though. There's no doubt about it. Because these Tea Parties are just a bunch of fanatical idiots. Nothing's never enough for these guys. You know. Well, hey, it's good seeing you guys. Yeah. Hey, let me tell you what. I need to go. This is a Republican district, right? This is the Republican part. These are all, yeah. And if these people are complaining on him, wait till he gets down to East Omaha. You know, so, yeah. Huh?